Thank you.
We are live.
We're live. This is Center Appropriations. It's March 13th. We are talking about fiscal year 26 budget requests. Today we have the Public Utility Commission. I will let the chair introduce himself. Do you know everybody at the table, or do you want us to introduce ourselves?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So normally it would be Senator Bruce, Chittenden Central there.
Yep, I'm Pat Brennan, Senator from Grand Isle County.
Jenny Lyons, Chittenden Southeast.
Andrew Perslick, Washington.
I'm Rich Westman, Senator from Lamoille District, and I have a lecture.
Bob Norris, Franklin County, and the town of Elbert in Grand Isle County.
And Senator Watson.
Yes, Ann Watson, Washington District. Hello again.
Senator Watson, this is the fourth time I've been on one of the committees this week. So Ed McNamara, Chair of the Public Utility Commission, and then
Ann Bishop, I'm the Operations Director at the Public Utility Commission. And I'm Karen Hutchinson, I'm the Business Manager at the Public Utility Commission.
great. All right, so slides are up. Just a little bit of background on the PUC itself. We're an independent agency, 3 commissioners, 6-year staggered terms, appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, completely separate from Public Service Department, who represents the public in front of Public Utility Commission for all proceedings. PSD also is responsible for energy and telecommunications planning, and they represent the administration. So what we do, pretty much every single state, every state in the country has some version of the PUC. They call them different things. A little bit of history. We were created somewhere around 1855 as the Railroad Commission. The general idea is that we regulate monopolies. There's always going to be monopoly companies out there because you don't have competition. You need some other entity to ensure that consumers are not gouged. And so that's the purpose. That was the underlying purpose. Over the last 150 years or so, obviously we've changed. We don't do railroads anymore. Our 2 largest industries for us are, well, 3 actually, electric by far, and then natural gas and telecommunications in a couple different ways. So we do not operate in a vacuum. You folks at the legislature give us direction. However, there's federal law that also governs the electric sector, natural gas, telecommunications, cable, all of that. So we have a much stronger role in electric and natural gas side because we have more state authority there. On the federal side, competition was meant to actually reduce the amount of regulation on the telecommunication and cable side, which is why we actually generally have less involvement there. The one notable exception for telecom, about 10, 15 years ago, you folks, the legislature, gave us jurisdiction to site telecommunications towers. It can also go through local and Act 250, or developers can choose to go through us. So you didn't mention water, but you also regulate water. We do that does exist. Yeah, we still regulate private water companies, so we do not regulate municipal water companies or what's called fire districts. Essentially, a fire district is very similar to a cooperative. So the ones that we do regulate tend to be for the most part, small, independent, private companies. A lot of them sort of were built to serve a housing development at a particular time. We only regulate the rates associated with water company. We do not get into the quality of service. That's primarily Agency of Natural Resources. So at a high level, there's about 25 of us total. We have 25 actual real people. In budget terms, we have 30 positions, 5 classified and 25 exempt. I'll get into sort of the discrepancy later. In FY24, just to give you an idea of how much we do, So 3,300 new cases were filed with us in FY24. Of that, about 2,600 were net metering registration approvals, and those tend to be fairly straightforward, do not require a lot of work by us. And then we also have, you'll see EPUC in here. That's our electronic filing system that was created about 10 years ago or so. It's a really useful system because it provides transparency. All our documents are up, easily searchable by anybody who can just go onto EPUC's website. So we issued about almost 1,600 orders and certificates of public good in FY24.
Is that 3,300 new cases? How does that compare to other years? Is that kind of normal, or is that a lot more?
My guess is the number of net metering registrations, I believe, went down a little bit over the last few years. So 3,300 is.
3,300 is a little bit lower than in some of our, some previous years.
So quick summary of our budget. So budget request 5.144 million. 100% special funded. We received no general funds.
I'm glad you put it as a pie chart. That makes it.
I wanted to make sure that folks could actually see it. So wanted to make sure it wasn't just words.
Yeah.
So we're funded primarily from the gross receipts tax. And so the utilities that we regulate pay a tax based on their total gross receipts every year. And so every year in April, they remit payments to Department of Public Service, and then the end of the fiscal year, we receive payments from a certain portion, 40% of those payments that the department receives. The Department of Public Service retains the remaining 60%. So if you look just at the numbers, FY26 budget, it looks like a decrease compared to FY25. I'll get into a little bit later, clean heat standard. FY24 was the only year in anybody's memory that we actually received general funds. And that was specifically to create the gross receipts tax. Sorry, I just mixed two concepts. To create the clean heat standard. I'll get into a little bit more about the mechanics of that money. So we don't actually we're not like A&R, we don't own any buildings, we don't own, we're not taking care of boat launches, anything like that. So salaries and benefits make up 87% of our budget. So not a lot of flexibility. Health insurance premiums, retirement increase, had significant increases. That was about $200,000 increase for us for FY26. Internal service funds, it's about another 6% of our budget. Also, just to be entirely upfront, our revenues in FY26 do not cover the full cost of the commission. So we do have reserves. Those are being spent down to supplement the revenues. And we're going to review the projections, long-term projections for gross receipts gross receipts tax, to better understand how long the reserves can continue to support commission work. And also we're going to be conducting a study of potential revenue requirements, expectations going forward.
Do you have official reserves, or do you just do you call your carried forwards reserves? You know what I mean? Statutory?
When you say, so we have carryovers from year
Is that
to
what you call
year.
the reserves?
No, the reserves were created, reserves have been around for a while now, including from the last tranche of sort of federal money, not ARPA, the ARA funds. So that was when I believe we started accumulating some reserves. And so we've had those in place since that point, and we've started to draw them down much more regularly.
Part of it, like, so at a certain time, you said we should put some money in the reserve, or do you put money in the reserve like every year when you have?
To the extent that we have any any extra money, we would put that into the reserve.
At the beginning of the budget year, not like at the end of the budget year.
It typically would be at the end of the budget year, is if we have money left, because we are forecasting, the Department of Public Services forecasting what our gross receipts tax revenues are. We don't actually know till the end of the year if that was enough to cover our budget or not. So in some years, particularly when we received some federal money, we had extra gross receipts revenues and we put those into the reserve. If the revenues were less than projected, we would use the money from the reserve. It's just that more recently, the trend has been we're using money from the reserve every year, and the amount that we're taking from the reserve is growing.
You've never budgeted the reserve.
We've never budgeted a reserve.
Do other groups do that? Okay. With the budget? Yeah, it seems a little different, but. Is the reserve listed on, like, where would you see the reserve?
It's essentially our special fund balance.
Okay.
So you can look and see that our special fund balance as of last June 30th was about $4.2 million.
Right.
And because we don't get revenue for this year until the last day of the fiscal year, we are spending our reserve, what we're calling our reserve.
Right.
We're spending it throughout the year, and then we replenish it at the end of the year.
Right. So I wonder if reserve, it's reserved with quotation marks, I think,
Yes.
officially, but okay, yeah.
Thanks. So commission's workload performance. So I mentioned earlier, 3,300 new cases. Timeframes, we actually do establish certain timeframes for different types of cases. We're generally meeting those. We do have a report on our website as well that has further detail on this. So just to give a flavor of what we do, in 2024, we had 2 cases related to the development of potential clean heat standard. We had rate increases by Green Mountain Power and Vermont Gas Systems. We also reviewed GMP's proposed zero outage initiative. Investigation into electric vehicle charging rates, indirect acquisition of consolidated communications, updates to disconnect rules, and implementation of various rules. So for 2025 cases that we already know, these aren't technically cases, but we have a couple reports to the legislature. One on thermal energy exchange networks, everything from how you set the rates to how they operate, construction, permitting. Another report on, it's called the rate stabilization for low and moderate income households. We recently opened an investigation into Burlington Electric Department has a negative EEU fund balance, trying to understand the causes of that. And we have already looked at a couple EV charging rates. Integrated resource plans, this is the idea is that a monopoly should be looking at over the next 10 to 20 years of how they're providing service at the lower or the least cost. So we have Vermont Gas, Green Mountain Power, and Burlington are some of the more prominent ones that we're doing. Updating rules on energy storage, proposed renewal of Vermont telephone companies' certificate of public good to operate cable television. We have a couple 20 megawatt solar projects. Vermont Supreme Court told us to review or to try again with Vermont Gas Systems petition to amend a CPG for Addison Natural Gas Pipeline and a proceeding regarding utility resilience.
Underlined.
Yes.
Curiosity about the energy storage facilities. Do you know where all the batteries are? And obviously Green Mountain Power and getting Tesla batteries up locally, but do you have any idea of what the what that storage capacity in the state is for, private ownership? Do you get any of that information?
And sorry, just to be clear, you're talking about the non-GMP, the non-residential?
I'm talking about residential.
Oh, the residential.
Yeah,
Do we actually just,
there's not.
We do not, homeowners do not need any kind of permit from us to put
No,
that
I know,
in their house, so we
it
don't
just
have
goes in the
any-
garage, right?
Yeah, they just go in the garage or we don't have any information about residential scale. The statute requires people now with, if they want to install a battery that is larger than 100 kW to, file a petition for a certificate of public good with us. To put that in perspective, a homeowner, if you're putting like 2 Tesla Powerwalls, you're something more like 15 kW.
Yeah.
So it's-
and I will say though, on the residential side, the vast majority of, at least it's my understanding that the vast majority of people with residential systems have a tariff with Green Mountain Power that basically lowers the cost, and that's why they're entering into it. GMP gets to operate the battery. So we do have data indirectly through GMP on that, but we don't actually collect it ourselves. We don't regulate those.
Thank you.
They might report on it in some other case, like they've X number of customers signed up for the tariff.
Yep, exactly. So just ongoing and likely cases. So most years we have one of the municipal or cooperative electric utilities lately have filed a rate increase. Renewable energy standard was updated last year, so we do have to modify the rule. We have ongoing oversight of the 3 energy efficiency utilities, that's Efficiency Vermont, Burlington Electric Department, and Vermont Gas. And then regular reviews of different programs, alternative regulations, standard offer. So I mentioned 2,300 net metering cases. That's a large part of our work involves review of the siting of electric generation facilities. We also, as I mentioned, review wireless telecommunication towers any given year, typically about 100 applications. Last year was low, I think in the 60s or so. And then also I just want to know a large part of what we do is entirely reactive. We don't get to control the pace of cases before us. It's if somebody files a petition, we have to deal with it at that time. And then there's sort of the odd things that pop up, like for example, if there's going to be a rate case related to the tariffs on imports from Canada, we'll have to deal with that. And then whatever reports you folks decide you want us.
So you're hoping we give you some?
I'm not asking for one, but I appreciate that offer, but. All right, I want to talk about clean heat only in the context of our budget, not talk, we already presented at this January 16th on the substance. So just as a reminder, back in 2023, you folks told us to design a clean heat standard and propose rules and also do a report. So report's available there. Flagging this because this was the most significant sort of large external chunk of work we've had in a really long time. There were 3 positions budgeted for it. It is really difficult to hire people who understand this issue, bring them up to speed in a very short period of time. So we ended up actually diverting a lot of other resources to the development of clean heat standard. Other things took a little longer on some other things.
I mean, so you didn't hire the 3, is that what you're saying?
We did hire those 3 people. I'm just saying it still requires a fair amount of additional work. You cannot just hire 3 new folks and say.
Just hiring 3 folks takes a lot of work.
Yes, exactly. So just noting that it did have this interesting sort of, what was I just thinking, like deer in a python effect of just like a giant glut of work that I'm still working through a little bit. So Act 18, it appropriated $825,000 from general funds for our work. Also established 3 positions, 2 permanent and 1 limited service position. The 825,000 was for the 3 positions as well as the contractors that we needed to actually do the analysis and do the work to develop the proposed rules. So it was one-time FY24 monies, and that was it. So the work continued though beyond FY24. So as of a few months ago, we had expended 830,000 roughly, and to carry forward 2 positions still on clean heat to the end of the year, and as well as some contracts as well. It's about another 400,000. So sorry, no, we're expected to incur an additional 400,000 for the end of the year.
Is that for those positions that were hired?
For those positions that were hired and for some of the contract costs, which working with contractors, sometimes the invoices come in later, those kind of things. So, am I getting that right?
And one of those positions is vacant.
Yes, thank you. One of those positions was vacant through most of FY25.
Then are those, since those are limited services, are those positions ending?
So there were 2 permanent positions and 1 limited service. It was one of the permanent positions. One of the folks in that permanent position found another job. We did not fill that one. We are not funding. We don't have money to fund those positions anymore. So the positions are technically still there, but nobody's going to be in them as of July 1st. And you can see the slide was actually from House Appropriations early on. Absent action from the legislature, no funding source for clean heat standard work. We're not seeing anything moving on that, so we fully expect to not have any of those positions or funding those positions. So once those positions are no longer funded, we're going to have roughly the staff we've had for pretty much the last 20 years. So FY spending compared to FY25 budget and FY26 proposed budget. So our actual spending in FY24 was 4.5 million roughly on PUC's or quote traditional work. 367,000 roughly on the clean heat implementation. FY25 we budgeted 5.7 million. Again, we did not receive any general funds for FY25. We were able to carry over from FY24 some of those general funds. So FY26 proposed budget is 5.144 million. So technically it looks like we have almost a 10% decrease, but when you actually get rid of that clean heat sort of bubble, it is an increase compared to 2 years ago.
Not by much. Like you're barely at your FY24 once you take the clean heat standard stuff out, right?
Yeah, so FY24, 4.5 roughly, and FY26, 5.1.
But that includes 878 of Act 18 general funds, right?
FY26 does not include any general funds or any CHS related work.
So that 878,000 for Act 18 implementation. So you budgeted it, but you're not going to do that because there's no Act 18 implementation?
I'm sorry, that clause actually, which included 878,000, that relates to the FY25 budget.
Oh, okay. I see.
Not the FY26.
Okay.
Sorry, I should probably have broken that up a little better there.
Okay. Oh, I see. You're saying that the comparison, which included that money.
Yes.
Okay. I get it.
Thank you. FY25 to FY26 decrease would have been larger, but I mentioned earlier benefit costs, roughly 200,000. So retirement, healthcare, and then some of the vacancy saving, internal service funds cost increases.
Okay.
Can talk a little bit about funding sources for FY '26. Just want to keep emphasizing no general fund monies. So where the revenues are actually coming from. Gross receipts tax represents about 95% of our special fund revenues. All our revenues are special funds. So fees paid by applicants. So anybody who is, or I should say, application fees apply to projects that are not essentially covered by the gross receipts tax. So if Green Mountain Power, which has, and they've done this, proposed a solar project and they petition us to build a solar project, Green Mountain Power is paying gross receipts tax, so our work is funded. If Encore Renewable is another one who does a lot of work in Vermont, they're a merchant, so they don't pay any gross receipts tax. Up until 2019, they didn't pay anything towards regulatory review. So 2019 is when application fees went into effect. They are the ones, those are the folks who actually pay the application fees. They're a little bit less than 4% of our revenue.
And do their application fees equal what the gross receipts tax would be?
No, so about 2018 is, I think it was Department of Public Service at the time in conjunction with the PUC, put forward a study and a bill that essentially said, we have a large portion of our work now with these merchant generators, like Encore and others. We need some sort of sustainable funding for that. And my understanding, and I can be corrected on this, is it was not meant to approximate gross receipts. It was intended, the application fees were sort of a best guess at how much revenue could be raised to reflect the work associated with review.
So the utility companies that basically it falls on everybody, but whichever utility you are, a municipal or the two cooperatives or a Green Mountain Power, it gets spread amongst all the ratepayers to pay the tax. But if you're a private company and you do the development, you only pay the cost of applying.
That's correct.
The cost of applying in the PUC's review, or that's what it's kind of like other fees.
Well, they all get the same review in that, but one would wonder why the third-party developers that are on the outside of this would get a benefit when the utility companies is falling on all the, you know, we all use power unless you're off the grid, and there aren't many of them.
So this was to help in that, at least the developers pay something, but I guess your question could be, are they paying the right amount?
Right, you know, I'm a Vermont Electric member. We have community solar in a number of places across our system now, from Heinsberg to Alberg, and we pay.
So I do have a slide in a little bit on application fees in particular. So if you can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Third pocket of revenues, or third stream of revenues for us, bill backs. All this means is when a petitioner files a case, we have a court reporter for transcripts, all that kind of work. We pay the court reporter directly, and then we bill the petitioner back, whether it's Green Mountain Power or Encore or anybody. So that's where, and you can see on slide 11 where the different, the extent of the different revenue sources. So what's missing, that when you add those three up, it doesn't meet our full requirement.
Ann has her hand up. Senator Watson.
Thank you. Sorry, I think I missed the part about bill backs. What are we billing back for? I think I missed that part.
Yeah, it's, so first I'll note it's a very small amount of total revenues. It's about $75,000. The bill backs are for costs that we incur and then bill back to the petitioner. The most obvious one, I think, where most of the bill backs actually come from are associated with, we have a court reporter who provides a transcript of the evidentiary hearing and the public hearing. We pay the court reporter, and then we bill the cost of the court reporter back to the petitioner.
Okay, so that's in addition to any application fee that they might have also.
Yes, they only receive that if they, for example, if a evidentiary hearing is required or a public hearing is required, those are not required in all cases.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And the Department of Public Service bills back for their work on the cases. So I assume it's a much larger number than it is for the PUC, because they can bill back staff time.
Department of Public Service can bill back. We can also bill back staff time. We typically do not. Department of Public Service, my understanding or my memory, because I did work there at one point, there's aesthetics consultants that review the aesthetics impacts of projects. I believe that the department, or at least they used to have a consultant on retainer and then bill individual reviews back to the applicant.
You have a question?
No, it just bugs me. And I will tell you why.
Bill back bug you or what?
No, the
the
bill backs
differential
don't,
payment.
but the whole piece. We have on our farm, we've leased, 2 4-acre pieces, that are 500 kW projects. And all of the profit from that goes to the bank that owns, the system in Boston. And, but if it was owned by my local utility, we pay tax on it, but because the profit's going to Boston, they pay nothing.
I'll have the slides to annoy you even more in a
I'm
little bit.
just,
So
that, you know,
That should be a requirement of all witnesses to know Senator.
well, I'm just saying that does not make me,
So and our discontent would go both to natural resources and energy and finance all at once.
all right, just really quick. Sorry, FY26.
Wellstone Bank.
So as I mentioned, the revenues that we receive is not sufficient to meet our budget, and so we are withdrawing 824,000 out of the reserve, essentially, or using 824,000.
So, and that is of that reserve of whatever, with a special fund reserve of 4.2
4.2 million, correct.
4.2. That's correct.
And maybe talk about this later, but that's the question. How many years would you be able to do that?
Yep, and I will talk, yeah. All right, so very quickly,
I might just, in many cases, when you go through a deep recession, all of these funds, we've gone through and gone, there's some little surplus money and we're desperate and we cleaned out funds.
Right, you reverted back. To
You
the general-
reverted back.
Or not back, because it was never in the general fund.
Never in the general fund, and it usually has a special tax source that it comes from. But if you run into trouble, it is a place that we quite frequently look.
Right. Which I assume when you guys do your budget with the governor's office, do they ever say, hey, can we take some of that reserve money?
I've worked for the commission for about 26 years, and during that time, I'm aware of 2 instances where funds were taken from our special fund. One instance was used when there was a shortfall in the Department of Public Services special fund, which is also collected from ratepayers, from gross receipts taxes. So they took money from ours to plug the hole. And another instance was quite a long time ago, and it was related to a case that had something to do with Vermont Yankee. And there was some.
Which needed money.
Yes, there was a desire to take some money to.
I've been around a little longer than, but when you get desperate, you do stuff. But it's always painful to try to rob one of those special funds.
making me wanna submit a new slide deck here and change some of my testimony.
It sounded like
Obviously kidding.
sounded like a warning.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
no, it's a good thing to think about.
Yep. So, some budget challenges we have. So because we don't receive any general funds, we have to self-fund salary and benefit increases. These are 87% of our proposed FY26 budget. And then this gets to Senator Westman's issue. Application fee revenues cover only a fraction of the cost of the work performed by the commission to review those applications. So I actually started at the Public Utility Commission in 2002, and the number of 248 applications, 248s are the review of citing. There are very, very few generation facilities being proposed. 20 years later, 20-something years later, we're seeing a really significant amount of our work being focused on citing cases. And with the doubling of the in-state requirement in res and in my view at least, potentially the low-hanging fruit sites, the really good sites potentially being taken up, that just means potential for more landowners opposing projects and more time spent on reviewing. So I mentioned before, application fee was implemented in 2019. I think I mentioned before we went live, this was a best guess to try to figure out how to actually raise the appropriate revenue. We didn't have any experience in doing this. So what we're finding is we didn't do a great job. So the PUC spends about 36% of our time on application funded measures or application funded cases. So mostly the merchant generation projects. So the application fees, as we noted earlier, it paid less than our budget in FY24. So significant disconnect there. So we spend more than 1.3 million every year on these kind of cases. And the application fee revenues in FY24 was about 160,000. So that's largely why we're having to withdraw from our reserve. We have taken work to actually streamline our review. The net metering registration in particular, it's more of a fillable online form, just need to ensure completeness and some other things. And we're also streamlining other small scale solar projects as well, trying to streamline them to the extent possible. I will also note that this streamlining also means that you're streamlining the opportunity for other folks to understand that these projects exist and their ability to participate in those proceedings. So I just want to flag there's two sides to that. So, we'd like to propose application fee increases. So because currently, Senator Westman's point, all ratepayers are currently subsidizing the work associated with the merchant generation projects. And so in this slide 13, there's a chart showing some proposed increases. So net metering registration, current fee is $100. We propose an increase to $200. Modification to net metering registration, this is sort of the biggest bump from $25 to $200. What we actually find is that a modification can be more work than just a new application because somebody already has a system. You need to understand what their rate was at the time, what their new rate will be. Is it truly a second project or an expansion, is it just an expansion of the existing project? You know, those kind of issues. For large projects that pay by the per kW, by the capacity of the project, increase that from 5 to 8, and modifications to large projects, $100 to $400.
And are you proposing these fees in some other venue or bill?
We have not found a good spot for them yet.
Okay.
So,
If only we knew the chair of the energy committee.
yes.
Yeah, that's a real shame. Someone really should talk to her. No, I'm happy to have more conversation about that if that's helpful.
Is there a miscellaneous, department or PUC bill?
We had a discussion about miscellaneous, PUC bill, and that's not going forward this year. House Energy in particular is not particularly interested in bringing that up, so.
Okay.
I also want to get to a second point though, in a little bit.
Okay, Senator Norris?
Yeah, I was just curious what your definition of a larger project is.
My understanding 150 kW, does that sound correct?
50, if it's larger than 50
Oh,
kW, it's considered a larger project, so.
Thank you.
And then, what, am I correct that the A&R, they get some money, do they get the money from this fee, or they charge it? There's two separate fees that a petitioner applicant pays.
There's two separate fees.
Okay. And are these fees, you
They're
don't
not
happen to know?
commensurate. I don't believe that they are. I think we really try to set them as what is the best guess to actually recoup the necessary costs that we have for review.
I just wondered if A&R has had the same experience as the PUC as far as the fees go and the amount of work, although it's very different.
Yeah, so my understanding, and I think Billy Coster at A&R can explain better, but some of this is, we do more of the mechanics of the review. So we have to host the public hearing if there's a requested one, the evidentiary hearing. Agency of Natural Resources has also done a good job looking at, for example, grassland birds was an issue. So they created a guidance document, and as long as the developer is being good and follows the guidance document, A&R generally doesn't have issues. And so I think A&R has figured out some ways to streamline their work, just as we figured out our ways to streamline some of our work. Okay. All right.
Might add, just to be really clear,
It's not fair.
these fee amounts that you see here, the Public Utility Commission only receives 40% of the fee amounts. The remaining 60% is, funds the Public Service Department.
Yeah. Thank you. I forgot to
So
say
the fees are split to 60-40, just like the grocery sheet.
Yes.
that's correct. Great, and I should just go through very quickly the other bullets here. So this would increase the fees from 160,000 to roughly 345,000. And
Still not 840-something thousand out of the reserve fund.
that's correct.
Yeah, that's covered.
We had some internal discussion about what would the application fees need to be and what is politically possible even as well. I'll just be very blunt about that. Some of these, and part of the issue with any kind of application fee like this, if it's a straight fee that everybody pays the same, I'll just say some developers are much better at talking to neighbors, being really good about sort of laying the groundwork than others. And so those folks in some ways would also be subsidizing the ones who just plop something anywhere and deal with the ramifications. So application fees are always going to be an inexact sort of science. So yeah, even with these application fees, it's still not covering our full costs associated with just doing the work.
Have to double it.
So we've talked a little bit about fund reserve balance. So the overall purpose just absorbs sort of the year to year. The other thing too, for gross receipts tax, the electric and natural gas in particular fluctuate by year. So when you have a really cold winter, you're going to see higher revenues. When you have a nice mild winter, very mild summer, you're going to see much lower. And so there's yearly fluctuation. It's not like GMP pays the same amount every year. It's going to be different. So the reserve helps us with a buffer. Also allows us to do things like actually the clean heat standard. Since it wasn't fully funded by the legislature, we were able to absorb some of that with the reserve. Creating EPUC, our online filing system, that was done through reserves, and we've done some other additional work as well. associated with them. So we have been increasingly looking to our reserves in the last 10 years or so. The longest time it was actually more of an accumulation. Lately it's been more of a withdrawal. So about 4.2 million in the reserve balance as of June 30th. So sustainable funding study. So one of the things when we were looking at application fees and also just looking at budgets overall, electric vehicles and heat pumps, electric vehicles in particular, add a lot to utilities revenues. It's a lot of kilowatt hour sales and therefore should be a higher gross receipts tax. What we're seeing is that the expected revenues that would come from electrification are not showing up. As a side note, ISO New England, who's responsible for managing the regional electric grid, they just looked at their estimate of electrification, including electric vehicles. They're also seeing that there's, on a region-wide basis, it is nowhere near, the rate of electrification is nowhere near what folks were predicting a couple of years ago. So, long-winded way of saying, once there's a lot of electric vehicles and heat pumps, the gross receipts tax should actually be sufficient in theory. However, when that actually happens, we don't know. So we have 4.2 million in reserves. We're withdrawing over 800,000 this year. We can't keep doing that. And so what we're going to do is this summer, we're going to look at what are the best projections for gross receipts tax revenues going forward. What are other states doing with gross receipts tax? Excuse me, I'm not proposing this, but my understanding is at least one other state sets their budget and then sets the gross receipts tax to raise the budget. So it does it backwards compared to
Like with your education funding.
yeah. So
which has been really successful. How much more time do you have, Ed? Because I know that
I can do this in, I got one more slide after this. So does that work?
yeah, does that work for you, Ken?
Yeah. Great. All right, so our plan is to actually to do a study, look at projections for gross receipts tax, try to understand what we can actually do for long-term sustainability, because otherwise we're going to be facing shortfalls in the next several years. Also, just want to note application fees, as I mentioned earlier, it's not going to cover the full costs. This is sort of more of a stopgap measure and more to reflect the general principle of cost causer pay and to provide greater equity as
It
well.
only covers in a project that isn't ongoing, it's only one time.
I'm sorry?
The gross receipts tax is every year all the way straight through. So if my utility builds a project, they pay a gross receipts tax on what it's producing all the way through. What you're talking about is fees that are one time.
Yes, but that one-time fee is for our one-time review. After that, we actually, unless there's a violation of their permitting requirements, we don't really have much to do with those folks at all. I understand what you're saying, but
that's not fair to a utility that does project.
I understand what you're saying, yeah. We're not recommending socializing all merchant generation projects.
I didn't say that,
Yeah.
but I pay an electric bill every year.
Yes, hopefully every month.
Every month.
All right.
Glad to pay it.
So very last slide. We are looking at ways to sort of reduce our costs, reaching out to BGS. Can we reduce office space? Remote hearings are working really well. There's different things that we can do to reduce costs, but given that salaries and benefits are 87% of our budget, there's not a lot of leeway there. Other question, we're not proposing any new initiatives for FY26, and we don't receive any federal funding. One quick side note, last 2 years, we did receive what's called Energy Innovation Fellows and they were funded by U.S. Department of Energy. That's not going to happen this year.
And on your ups and down sheet, it seems like this often happens, like some people's ups and down sheets are kind of out of focus.
I know, and it's hard to like print it and get it.
Yeah,
I spent a lot, yeah, it definitely is.
because it's not an Excel document.
It is, but like trying to get it into one page,
Oh,
we discussed putting it on 2 pages, it was.
Yeah, I don't know, some people seem to figure out a way to make it, maybe they just recreate it or something. But there's nothing unusual on here as far as, I mean,
The primary thing is clean heat, as I mentioned earlier. It's this sort of bubble that we had for FY 24, 25. We're coming back down to FY 26.
so like,
One thing that may look a little weird is the vacancy savings string.
I was just gonna,
Department of Finance wanted us to add the 5 positions, the 2 vacant positions and the 3 clean positions into salaries and benefits and then take it out of the vacancy savings.
okay. And that's what you did,
Great.
okay.
Any questions?
Any other questions? Commission? Well, as I said, Senator Watson has your budget. If there's any other questions, we have all the information now. We will look it over. We know you're just across the street, so we'll go get you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Next, we will hear from the state's attorneys and sheriffs. Sorry to make you wait around.
I joined the Zoom preemptively to a little less delay.
You can sit up there. I think Tim wanted you.
Thank you.
The chair of education.
What was the report? I've got it.
Oh, the report, you need it. I don't know.
Okay.
So I understand we had a birthday here today.
Yes.
Oh,
Happy
shut
birthday,
up.
boy.
Happy birthday.
Shut up. I love you, but shut up.
There's probably still birthday cake in the Lieutenant Governor's office. Baked by the Lieutenant Governor.
An executive cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tim Leaders-Dumont, the Executive Director of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. And with me is Ann Noonan, Director of Labor Relations Operations. And Barb Bernardini, who is, we sometimes refer to as the sheriff in our office, but she's been our fiscal steward for 18 years in the department. And
You have a good staff, you better take care of them.
yes, yes, we try. We have a great staff. We're at 110 State Street, right over there, and we really support 29 offices, the 28 elected officials that are constitutional, the sheriffs and the state's attorneys, and then our central office here. And obviously, as you know, we don't have county government essentially, so that's why we exist, to serve those 28 to 29.
And has it always been the state's attorneys and sheriffs? Or is that a more recent creation to merge the two?
Well, someone might know when
Barb
the
said
department
yes.
was
Yes.
What's that?
It's been that way.
It's always been that
Been
since
that way.
the beginning.
Yeah, so just some big picture items, and then Annie is going to walk you through.
You have a lot of documents.
Yeah, so we are going to start with the state's attorney's budget. We have 4 budgets.
4 unit budget.
Yeah, so on your postings, you'll see one that says state's attorney's budget detail, I believe.
Right.
And the first page, I'll be your guide up here. If you want the up and downs, they're in here. But on the first page of the state's attorney's detail, you'll see this. It's the annual summary that Annie produces. So you'll see this for state's attorneys. Our next budget is, I believe, the victim advocates, and then the SIU, special investigation units. And our last budget is the sheriff's budget. But starting sort of big picture for the department, we have, the 14 states attorneys, the state's attorneys, with the 14 states attorneys 58 deputy state's attorneys, about 30 administrative professionals, 26 victim advocates, and it's a department that is working on 23,500 cases, 96 homicides. We are also working on a number of investigations for homicide, which have not yet been filed. An example is the Honoree Fleming case. So big, important cases where the filing has not occurred, but there's still, our department is staffing, working with the law enforcement groups, with search warrants and et cetera, those types of cases. So well over 100 homicide-related matters that our department is working on. Over the past year, we have cleared 3,000 cases. Last year, we had 26,000 plus pending cases. This year, we have 23,000. So we've cleared 3,000 cases out of the backlog. We had an 109% clearance rate. That means we cleared more cases than we filed over the last year. That's working with the judiciary and with the defense bar. And I'm really proud of that 100% number. We would really need to be at 200% to effectively clear the backlog in any number of years, but we'll obviously get to that. The average caseload for an attorney in our department is between 350 and 400 cases. The average caseload for a victim advocate, who all of them work in our state's attorney's offices, is about 600. If you think about the administrative professionals, they touch every single case, and so their caseloads are also just enormous. The target caseloads that we would like to see is 150 to 200. And even that is on the upper side of what national best practices would be. Other states are so, they're in another plane sometimes in terms of how they're sourced because of the county sources of funding. They don't have to come to the legislature every year. But there are other states that do things like you're the felony prosecutor, you're the misdemeanor prosecutor, you're the appellate prosecutor, you're the PCR prosecutor, post-conviction relief. We do it all. So we become essentially general practitioners in the criminal landscape and the family landscape. And
the question on the clearing case rate, the 100% just keeps you treading water. I've heard that statistic from others, like the judiciary and the defender general yesterday. Are you all just counting the same cases? Are those numbers different? Like, or should the number be the same? So somebody doesn't get credit for clearing the case, right? So you're all clearing the case together.
Yes, and so we obviously file affidavits of probable cause. We sign our names to those affidavits, and so we kind of think they are cases that we have brought forth. But we are working with the three-pronged stool, so to speak. I will say we are staffing 100%. We work with the Defender General's office. He has the numbers about what percentage of the total he's covering, but we also work with private attorneys. So the Defender General's office represents indigent defendants, but we work with private counsel. Yeah, so over the years, our caseloads, according to what the Defender General has stated, we have larger caseloads than the average defense attorney. I want to say right out there, they are working with individual clients. It's a different environment, but I just wanted to say, based on the data, we do have very, very high caseloads that are not sustainable, despite making progress on the backlog. Another thing I just wanted to note, we made progress in getting to trial more over the last year, and trial is one of the #1 drivers of disposition and clearance. So it's not surprising that we've moved 3,000 cases over the past year. We went to trial 65% more times this past 12 months than the prior 12 months to that, which is a good thing. Most of those trials are felonies. When you hear the word felony in Vermont, you think it's serious, and they are really serious cases. Misdemeanors can also be incredibly serious. In most other states, the misdemeanor penalty, and that's how you determine misdemeanor versus felony, is a 1-year penalty. In Vermont, the misdemeanor penalty is a 2-year penalty. So for example, a misdemeanor domestic assault, which can be incredibly time-consuming, violent, and difficult, and take many months and sometimes years to prosecute, that is a misdemeanor in the state of Vermont. There's also an aggravated domestic, which is a felony. But in many other states, the misdemeanor domestic is a felony. And so when you look in our data, you'll see some of the data in your presentation, and you see all those misdemeanors embedded within is things like simple assault, misdemeanor domestic, and other person-to-person contact that in other states would be felonious. So
when you said the 100 homicides, we heard from the Attorney General
this week, and I think there was a question from the committee about how much work that they take on from the state attorney's office. And I think the attorney general said that they've offered to take the homicides.
So I'm just gonna tell you, I spoke with the chair of our executive committee last night. We listened to that testimony. The chair of our executive committee is Erica Marthage from Bennington County. They have about 20 pending homicides. She has not received that offer. So I think them testifying that there's an open offer is helpful. We can certainly communicate that to our field. That's not an experience that we've had.
Right, I was surprised at her.
Statewide offer. Yeah. We appreciate that they're willing to do that. Title III says that they actually must be engaged in the homicide work. And so that's something that obviously we're happy to communicate to our field. We've been meeting, we have a meeting now once a month with a staff member from AGO. We'll continue to talk through issues, but we're carrying the homicides.
You'll follow up on that from that testimony that was given.
We are,
let us know how that goes.
the offer goes both ways. We do send things to the AG and they are getting denied as well. So we're doing our best, but after a certain number of denials, we stop asking.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah. We have had homicides denied in terms of requests to the AGO, and that is something that we'll obviously continue to try to work through. But talking about our issues here, Annie can walk you through our initiatives and our budget asks, but I wanted to give you some of that context.
Thank you for recommending Newman.
Jeff, Senator.
I do have I don't know if you're working off this screen here, Annie?
Yes.
Okay, I got a question we get down toward the bottom.
Okay, great. So Annie Newman, Department of State's Attorney's Labor and Operations Director. So what we're hoping to do, and we know it's late in the day, and we'll try to make this as succinct as possible. So of course we get our governor's recommend, and what you see is increased total, and all of that's right there for you. I think probably the most important thing to talk about in terms of where we're going to be for 26 is in the state's attorney's budget is we're very concerned about the vacancy savings number that we have, 649,126. As you heard Tim say, our caseloads for both our prosecutors, our admins, and our victim advocates are staggering well beyond anything that is recommended to be carried. National Attorneys Association says, for criminal caseload, you should handle between 100 and 150. We're handling 365 cases, just not sustainable. Recruitment and retention issues for our department are very difficult because not only our attorneys have tremendous caseloads, much of which produces stress to them because of the nature of the case, but in addition to that, we are in the office. That is something that's really important to remember. A day where they're doing arraignments with 40 arraignments in a day, and multiple of our attorneys, we're all there. They all have to be in the office. Our victim advocates, the same thing. Our admins are there. So we're competing in an environment for positions where we have very, very high caseload. We have on-call evenings and weekends, and the police, and they're calling us, they're going out for untimely deaths and all of that. And then they have to be in the office regularly and all that. And we're competing with employers who are paying the same or equal amounts or higher, and with a really normal schedule. And we've lost people in state government to other agencies, some of one that you mentioned just now, where they basically say, I can go and have a really normal caseload, a very manageable caseload, and I only have to come to the office a day a week, and I don't have an on-call in the evenings and all of that. So that's a real challenge. So when we have to hold, with a 649, what does that translate to in terms of positions that we would have to hold? Well, obviously it would depend upon if it was an attorney that became vacant versus an admin, but on average you could presume 649,000, 6 positions. Wherever they fall within the mix, we'd have to start the year by holding 6 positions open.
Did you not propose this?
Well, we do propose this, but our operating budget is about 11%. And I'll give you a little bit of a flavor of what we pay for. We pay for mental health evaluations and transcripts and witness fees and witness mileage. We have a training budget of only $10,000 a year for 135 employees. We have an IT budget, which is minimal, very minimal. We have notification that we have to replace computers this June that are not compatible with the new Windows 11, we got a notice that said, I'm gonna use the term that said 25 of your computers are gonna blow up on June 30th, and you gotta replace them. And I said, Barb and I looked and said, we didn't budget for 25 computers. We right now, up in the storage room, have 5 computers available that we can put out to the field if somebody's computer dies. We operate on this razor thin operating expense budget. And we literally, I hate to quote this, but talk about using a scalpel. Barb and I sit there with a budget and try to figure out, can we take 2,000 off this line? Can we take 500 here? So ultimately, the only other place you can go when you're as driven as we are by personnel is to put it into vacancy savings.
Yeah.
We were hit, you saw the budget adjustment memos that came out. We got hit with a lot of IT expenses we were absolutely unnotified about. So those are all really stressful things. But you're correct, Mr. Chair, that we have to develop it, but we have nowhere else to cut.
Would you be able to fill those positions if you had them?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
We were able to fill permanent positions that we received.
Yeah.
How many positions do you have open?
Well, right now we have we have very few positions open right now. But we have 4 limited service attorney positions that are vacant because every time we make an offer, they say, how long's the position good for? And we have to tell them it expires on June 14th. So they're like, well, thanks, but I'm not coming to you to work for 3 months. So we have asked for the conversion of the 4 positions from limited service to permanent. We certainly be able to fill if we have the money back. And we just need to clear this vacancy savings number is what we really feel. Okay, then we've had a lot of increased costs in mental health competency. I just ran the numbers because we got an inquiry from finance and management staff about that. So 2 organizations that have been contracted with by the Department of Mental Health, our budget for mental health evaluations is $140,000 a year. And because
did Senator Arce get your question?
She's getting right into the,
Okay.
getting right into the gist of it right here,
okay,
yes.
thank you.
I'll go back to that.
So $140,000 a year, and the 2 mental health contracts have cost us $73,000 and change out of a $140,000 budget. So I think everybody realizes that a lot of people coming into the system have significant mental health problems and substance abuse that drives mental health issues and stuff like that. So a big issue that we're facing is in our work is the person competent to stand trial? And so we have all of these much greater competency costs that we anticipate. But what's driving that is that we have people who are coming into the system who are really struggling with mental health issues, but also the fact that we have spent 53% of our budget addressing the mental health evaluation costs that are from the 2 organizations that are under contract.
I just wanted to add one other thing. When we go to trial more, that means we have to bring those experts from mental health to trial. So as we're clearing backlog cases, it's not cost neutral with respect to this. And the fact that we're using this, these dollars means that we're actually engaging with a lot of cases. And competency is fluid, as Senator Lyons and I are on the Mental Health Commission together for the courts. So every day in a 10-day trial, an individual may have to get 10 competency evaluations on those 10 days.
So I do have a follow-up on this. We heard from the Defender General also. It is late, I probably shouldn't be asking questions. Just a quick overview. He tells us about the cost involved with that. So these mental health competency evaluations, if they're requested by the state, you pay for them and Defender General. But I thought the Department of Mental Health came in or someplace that's coming out of their budget for payment.
So the Department of Health has a contract for the initial evaluation that's ordered by the court. Looking at you, because I know you used to occasionally transport individuals to court. So during the arraignment or in the affidavit, if it's clear that there's some issues that need to be addressed competency-wise, the judge may order that competency eval. DMH then has a contract with an entity called a Novotel. They do the initial. Now, from then on, if the individual is found competent, the state is going to need that expert for any future hearing or trial. That's where our money starts kicking in. If the individual is found not competent and we want to get our own expert to challenge the DMH evaluator, then we have to spend money on a not from the DMH contract for Novotel. We have to get a new person to challenge that competency if we want to challenge it. And that's where, to keep a case alive and avoid dismissal, avoid telling victims the case is no longer viable. We want to, in many instances, including violence, want to exhaust the remedy of making sure the individual is competent or not.
So, and it's still late, but, are the courts requested in-person testimony?
It depends on the.
Because the bill allowed him not to, correct?
Last year, you put in a bill for some types of proceedings to allow for the virtual option. I'm going to remain slightly fuzzy on this because there may be Supreme Court litigation that I don't want to get in front of, and Senator Wise and I both sit on the Mental Health Commission with a member of the Supreme Court. So I just want to say it depends, but for trials, we always need everyone in person. Sometimes for motion practice, there might be a judge that allows it, depending on the circumstance. And the legislation last year, I think, helped some judges with that. But for the trial, even we would want to make sure everyone's there in person so the jury can observe the witnesses. The confrontation clause dictates the trial process.
Thank you, I don't want to slow you down.
No, good questions.
It's a big area,
Oh, I know.
yeah.
What I would mention is that to understand our budget, all of the stuff that we have to submit, I know you go cross-eyed reading all that, but the two most important things, this sheet here, which basically just summarizes, and then this was in response to the questions that were posed by this, the chair of House and Senate Appropriations, and they asked a bunch of questions, and I tried to give you answers very quickly to this, like what is our mission, what are we funded for, who we serve. I think most people know who we are, so I'm not going to go through any of that. Two of the pieces I would say is the budget pressures. One is our vacancy savings. We talked a little bit about some of the others, but also there was a question about, do you have recommendations for programs of work that could be shifted? And that's in this presentation also.
Is it in the same document as the?
So it's the second document that is not the detail, not the up and down document, but there's a second one that says state's attorneys.
This one,
with the blue heading. This is the front page, state's attorney unit.
Is it state's
Okay,
attorney detail?
No, it's not the detail.
Not the detail,
The one that says budget state's attorney's unit.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So in there are issues with challenges and what we think could be done to alleviate some of the work off our plate. Where would it go? We also have our list of what we're requesting in terms of additional staffing resources, and I didn't know if you want me to jump to
Where's
that.
that? Yeah.
That's the very last.
That's on page 7 of the presentation.
In the blue.
Not in the blue.
In the blue, yeah.
Get right to the heart of the matter.
So just as a reminder, our budget.
The staffing requests are in addition to the governor's record. This is
Oh, yes.
all the.
No, the governor's recommended didn't have our staffing requests.
Okay.
So.
You only have staffing requests?
I'm sorry,
You only have staffing requests. There's no other requests.
the vacancy saving piece.
Vacancy
And
savings.
this, yeah.
So you'd like that number reduced?
We would like the vacancy saving number eliminated if possible, and then we want to talk about
Okay.
our position request. So, we met with Senator Norris and have gone over this, and I understand, we definitely understand the fiscal pressures for the state. So it is important for us to at least share with you what we have in front of us. I would just want to remind.
Can I just, usually there is some number for vacancies. What's a realistic number?
I'd say a realistic number for us would be about half of that, maybe we could get down to 300,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's normally, that is.
Yeah, I'm just asking what the normal
The
with the
normal is
turnover, and that, so we're someplace between 250 and 300 is
That's correct,
probably about.
yeah, and that's traditionally about what we've had to carry, and we usually, with vacancies by the time you post to get people in. Yes, thank you, Senator, that's a good question.
So that would cover what we talked about, the 4 deputy states
So
attorneys.
4 deputy states attorneys, if we could convert, we have that money in our budget, they are budgeted in there, and that's great, but we don't, but their term, based on what we were authorized as limited service, expires this June. So converting them from limited service to permanent doesn't cost anything. They're all in state position numbers. You don't need a new number
The
for them.
benefits don't change.
Nothing changed. Well, they're budgeted for us. They got picked up in the FY '26 budget, but they all got a letter saying you're done on June 14th. So if we can convert those, that addresses the 4 deputy state's attorneys on this list. Really, what we're looking at, and if I can just remind the senators that we have 4 budget lines. We have the state's attorney, victim advocates, SIU, and the sheriffs. So this lists all of them together.
Okay.
And so the 6, let me maybe start at the bottom, the 6 state transport deputies are under the sheriff's budget. They also have a vacancy savings number that we need to, that's 649 or something like that. We would like to, 670, yeah, and we'd like to try to get rid of that.
So they have their own 670. Okay.
They have their own. And the 6 transport deputies that we're asking, I think both the courts and the DOC support us in that, because what they're finding is, as you know,
So what does the DOC do?
DOC, they used to be able to,
What's the acronym?
Department of Corrections.
Department.
So we all work together, you know, they used to be able to go to a facility, maybe move someone for us to get them closer to where they needed to be. I don't have to tell anybody how understaffed corrections is. They don't have the capacity to do that in any quick form. So we have to give them so much notice, and even at that, they sometimes can't do it. So we're in a situation now where we've got our 24 state transport deputies running all over the place. So we need 6. I believe the judiciary agrees with us. We've actually had to say sometimes in local situations to judges, we can't get the person there. We just can't do it. We don't have a team. We don't have anybody, and the sheriff may not have per diems, depending upon where they are. So that's a challenge, and law enforcement recruitment is a challenge. And I think that those are the two takeaways from the sheriff's budget. But here, and the victim advocates, 600 cases each, we really feel that we need to alleviate some of the stress on our victim advocates. They are just, they deal all day long with really serious.
One of them said to me today, we officially don't have pleasant conversations. Every single conversation I have is about something difficult for the person they're talking to. And when you have 600, that doesn't represent the number of victims. 600 cases could represent 1,000 persons who are victims.
And then they got people that probably just complain that they're
Yes.
Yes.
Sometimes they're complaining about the court, law enforcement, defense attorney, or prosecutor, but they're the ones that they have the contact information for.
So on this list, for the 6 paralegals, what we feel is that the paralegals could be doing the discovery and the media review. We have attorneys. Tim mentioned Erica Marthage, our state's attorney from Benny, 22 years as state's attorney. She had a case, a week or so ago, where she had to listen to something like 17 hours of media. Now, that's not really an efficient use of time, but somebody had to do it, and everybody was in court, everybody was getting ready for different things. Paralegal can sit with the media, because there's so much media now that they have to get through that. So we're looking to see if we can.
And when you say media, you mean like body cam?
Body cams.
Enormous amounts of body camera. Every case now involves video presentation. These paralegals would become familiar with discovery and then would be available for the actual trial proceedings to assist the attorneys in the court process, go smoothly during presentation of evidence.
Administrative support staff, we have approximately 31. We have offices that have 1 admin, and most of our offices only have 2. Now, Chittenden has a few more because it's the largest office with the largest number of attorneys, but they're dealing with people coming in, all the e-file and serve, all the discovery. We have expungement and sealing, which I think you've probably heard a lot.
Yeah, 70,000 orders, almost 75,000 orders since in the last 5 years. So those are sitting on admins and paralegals' desks. We just get to them when we can.
I mentioned the 4 DSAs, the deputy state's attorneys. What we look forward to is the language in the budget to convert them. A fiscal support staff, I'll say this, Barbara has been holding the fort down for all these years. We have 100 between all of our units, we have 175 employees, and Barb, 1 fiscal person. I help Barb as much as I can. I think we're a great team, but I'm doing labor relations and policy and all the other stuff I'm doing over at the office. We really need another a fiscal and another IT support. Speaking of IT, we have 175 employees in 29 offices and we have 2 IT people.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think it's novel. I was scanning around state government just on publicly available things. I could not find another agency of our size that had 1 finance person and 2 IT people. And the work we're doing is unique because we're working with 28 elected people. I know you all appreciate what it is to be elected, so it's not like we have a chief executive. We try, but we answer to the field. So we really are in need of a financial person and further IT support to be professionals.
Yeah, and we have,
Do you use ADS for all your,
ABS is great, but we don't, we're not, we have our
you have some on?
We have our own IT division, but I have good things to say about ABS. I think that they're helpful to us, even though we've gotten some bills we were not expecting. I don't think that was on them.
They're gonna correct it next year.
Yeah. I hope. And then, I'm gonna let Tim handle the last one, which is our PCR public
Yeah,
records and
so
training.
I'm just gonna point you, this is all of our cases at present as of December 10th, 2024, snapshot in time. So this is what was on our plates at the end of last year. You'll see all the way over on the right, second column, PCR, those are post-conviction relief cases. Those are all for people that have been sentenced, who are currently incarcerated, who have been convicted either by a jury of their peers or had a plea agreement.
Did you see this chart yesterday?
Last year,
We saw a different version of from the public defender, so this is easier to read than the.
I
Yeah,
appreciate-
but the numbers are all pretty close.
Yeah, there's a tons of cases.
Yeah, so 81 post-conviction relief cases. We do not have a post-conviction relief attorney. The Defender General's Office has the Prisoners' Rights Division and the Appellate Division. We have no dedicated staff to PCRs. What does that mean? The same attorneys with 400 cases in the criminal division, I experienced this here in Washington County, so I'd be in the courthouse in Barry, and Judge Mello would tell me in the civil division, get over to Montpelier, we have an important status conference in the post-conviction relief case. So you're juggling 2 different divisions. And in the PCR cases, post-conviction relief, these cases can be homicides from 20 years ago. We're calling law enforcement officers who are dead. We're calling victims and witnesses who are no longer with us.
This is about whether they should be released or not.
Exactly. These are relief from their incarceration. So my plea to the group here is, given what has been provided to the Defender General's Office, that we have a specialist that can work with victims from 20 years ago to keep all of that money that we poured into those convictions, 81 convictions, that we review them carefully. If there are problems with them, that we are letting people out. And if there are not problems with them, that we keep those convictions so that victims can understand that our criminal justice system has a sense of finality.
Are you saying there's an imbalance a little bit about the resources?
Yes, there's been an inequity in terms of how post-conviction relief cases have been
So
set.
they have specific folks working on post-conviction relief, so they're getting a lot of these cases to you, but they have people focus on it, but you don't.
And regardless of whether or not the Defender General's Office files a PCR, we get what are called pro se, and we have to respond to every one of those too. Those are handwritten, sometimes 100 pages long. We have to respond to them or we default. So in civil court, we also have to use the rules of civil procedure. Different training, different rule book from the criminal procedure book. I almost quit on my first day on the job because I was handed 5 of these in addition to my criminal caseload. Now, Judge Tebow was my boss at the time, and I had words with him at the time, but I learned a lot through the process, and it's why I'm pleading with you now that victims are deeply impacted by all of these filings, and I think we owe it to them to have a dedicated person like we do for appeals. Evan Meenan used to do a lot of the work in this building. He's our dedicated appellate attorney. We have one of those, and he does anywhere from 40 to 45 cases a year. These cases can involve thousands of pages of transcript review, expert testimony, and this person would also help with the enormity of our public records. So this attorney position would help with our public records work and our PCR work. We don't get easy public records requests in our department. Every time we see a case in the news, we expect a public records request for all the body cam, the investigative material, and right now it's being managed by Attorney McManus, who's our legislative attorney, and myself.
This would be one for the statewide.
Yeah.
But they do other stuff since last year that was 81. But that was just 81 on that day. That's not 81 throughout the
We
whole
could
year.
have handled hundreds that year.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my plea on that. The person would also essentially help with some of our training needs. We don't have a full-time trainer. So we try to shove a lot to a new attorney position, but we do feel we could be efficient. I had told Annie needed 2. She said keep it to 1, so we'll try.
And do you have a dollar figure for all these positions?
I do.
Is it enough? It's in here somewhere?
It's not, I was thinking that what I'll do is when I go back, I'll take this page, I'll write numbers into it and send it back to the committee.
Yeah, send it to me.
Yeah. Thank you. So let me, so the victim advocate budget, if we can go there.
Just got a quick question.
Yeah.
On the 6 transport deputies,
Yes,
you're presently down 1 now?
we're down 2.
You're down 2.
One, well, and we've been trying to work with Franklin County.
They used to be great to work with.
And so we're really trying to figure out the Franklin County situation, and we have Chittenden backing up Franklin County, and we're really trying to, I think, look
You
at,
could come over from the land.
to assess it from who needs, where are the transport orders coming from. We're working with the court and Lori Canty and folks to try to get a sense of where we should put those.
So you're roughly down 2. So my question is, Annie, is out of the 6 transport deputies and the vacancy savings, like Senator was saying that we have to have some vacancy savings. So if you had half of that, would that take care of 3 of those state paid deputies? But more importantly, where would you put them and who wants them?
Oh, everybody wants one.
Really?
Yes.
They come with a cost.
Someone too. So no, I think that what we would be looking at would be, we're seeing a lot of coming out of Bennington. We're seeing a lot coming out of Wyndham. We really probably could use more, but we certainly can use some, figure out Franklin. We can figure out the Franklin situation. And I would think that we would want to take a look at the Kingdom. You know, they're doing good work. All of them are doing really good work, but we have to try to figure out Central Vermont, whether because they're close, they could move that co-location where where you're handing.
So they wouldn't help out moving prisoners after hours to make sure that the courts were needed the next morning?
We're doing that too, yes, we are. So we get requests from, for example, Wyndham County might call us on Friday and say, or during the week and say, we got a transport order, we've got to get somebody down here to Brattleboro, and they have to be here for 9 o'clock on Monday morning. They're in Newport. Can we go get them tomorrow or Sunday? Can we go get them?
So they would be using that?
Yeah, yeah.
DOC short, we all know this, so.
Yeah, so we would be moving them around. But to answer, I think one of the questions you started to ask is we would certainly prefer not to be carrying any vacancy savings, but if we did, we could probably, our normal there is about $200,000, $230,000 in that. That's what we can traditionally manage around that.
So when you send the numbers
Yes, I'll put
for
that in
the
there.
positions, you can do the vacancy savings
I will.
numbers too, that's.
Yeah,
for
what's
all-
been tradition.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pick up the pace, because I know you guys love them. All right.
Moving to the victim advocates, I've got the summary sheet here.
Yeah. So similarly, the victim advocate has a vacancy saving, figure of 270,000. That's an increase of we had to increase that by 200,000 for this year. We've already talked about their workload, which is just tremendously difficult. So we'd like to have 6 more victim advocates, and we would like to eliminate some of that vacancy. Right now, we have only a 20-hour week victim advocate position vacant, and with a candidate who's we're getting ready to onboard. So there's no vacancies. We we have a very, very dedicated staff of victim advocates. They don't turn over very much. So we really that's carrying anything there with their caseload of 600 is really difficult to do. So we would ask that we could look at eliminating the vacancy saving or most of it, and then, ask for the additional positions that we really need. Now, just as a point of reference, you might remember that this was a program that was federally funded through the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women, and we received grant money for years and years from the Center for Crime Victim Services in Waterbury. And then they had come to the State House and said, we're losing money in that fund, it's getting cut, can we transition these positions over to the State General Fund? And I think that's worked well for them, and we've been okay, and it's worked well for us. I think the problem is when that first budget, everything kind of drives off your first budget. When the first budget was passed, because it happened so late in that legislative year, that there was really no accounting for operating expense. So the state's attorneys pay for some, like the phones for the victim advocates, and other things. So we have, and that's working okay, but it's a pressure, it's just another pressure against the state's attorney's budget. So I don't think there's really a lot there that we have to talk about other than, I think we manage that budget well, and we just really need more positions there for the victim advocates.
The 7% increase was in the government.
The governor's recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, we'll get the next one.
Sheriffs?
The SIU first.
SIU is super fast. Yes. So the Special Investigation Unit, you might recall, is just a pass-through of grant money. We have one position at central office who is the grants manager, and we came here a year ago and asked for, it was a contractor, and we asked for the position not to be a contract anymore because we felt we were not getting the accountability from the position that we needed. I'm pleased to say that this last year, they get 2 installments for their SIU work, that we have really cracked down and paid very close attention to everything that came forward. We saw, Barb and I picked up many things that we said, oh no, we don't pay for that. No, the state doesn't pay for that. So we've done, I think, a very good job of monitoring it, and I think we passed that along to our new grants manager, Siri Mooney, who worked for us as a victim advocate for 25 years and came over to work at the department here in Montpelier. And so she really has a great perspective. She understands what they're doing in the SIUs because she was a victim advocate for 25 years, so she understands all of what they're up to. So this budget is really, we're fine. The good news here is we're fine. Now the bad news is the challenge that they face is getting committed hours from law enforcement, because law enforcement positions are just not being able to be filled in across the country and here in Vermont. So that's their challenge, is getting local law enforcement agencies and the state police to be able to commit hours to the SIU.
They don't have their own staff.
The SIUs, when we give them 2 grants, we give them a program support grant and we give them a law enforcement grant. And they work on setting up agreements with the local law enforcement agencies.
How many staff?
Usually no more than 2, on average 2, sometimes 3. And usually for the program support, it pays for a program director who manages all the intakes and all of that, a forensic interviewer, and on occasion an administrative assistant, depending on how big the office is. But generally speaking, 2. And the most important thing in terms of that is getting the intakes done properly, monitoring the cases are moving forward and up the chain, and that they're not sitting on somebody's desk in a local law enforcement agency or DCF or whatever. So they coordinate all that. They do that multidisciplinary team approach where they have DCF, law enforcement, sometimes local medical professionals, the state's attorney's office staff. Our victim advocates often are engaged with all the MDT work. So they do a really good job. The forensic interviewing, specialized training, because you're dealing with children's, primarily child sex assault.
So is the training budget in this here?
I'm sorry?
Is the training budget in those figures for SIUs, investigators?
Yes.
Okay.
And we look at that and we ask them, how many people this year, and we also do a conference once a year because they have national accreditation. And so we do a training, a 3 or 4 day a year, in a row training for them once a year. It's coming up in April here in Montpelier, and all the folks that serve in the MDTs, it primarily picks up law enforcement officers, DCF employees, DMH employees. So we sponsor that with the money that you provide through this grant. We don't ask them to pay. We work in cooperation with the Vermont Children's Alliance under the National Children's Alliance, because that's the accreditation organization. So this program, we don't need any more money, we don't need any more staff. I just want to say thank you, because having a full-time person has made things go incredibly well, and they are watching every penny being spent.
Okay.
And then the sheriff's budget. The sheriff's budget is, pull that up. Did I get her to? That's not yet. Okay. Oh, you did. Okay. So the sheriffs are all general fund, and if I can remind you what we pay for as state government for the sheriffs is the sheriff's salary and benefits, retirement, health insurance, all of that, and 24 state transport deputies. Those are that's who's being paid for, and the director of sheriff operations, which was required by Act 30, that came out of Senate Government Operations a year or so ago, and we've hired Tracy Patnow, who was the Lamoille County SIU director. Stole a lot of people out of Lamoille County.
I know you did.
All very.
It's because we have good people.
You do, very competent people, and so we have Tracy doing
So
that.
if you need anybody over in Franklin, we can tell you what to do.
I appreciate that.
So we have, basically, it's paying for the sheriffs and the transport deputies and one director of sheriff operation. And actually it pays for one assistance for their extraditions and transport bills and all of that. That's one of the people that work in our office, Ashley Perry. But she does sort of multitask between the state's attorneys and the sheriffs. It does pay for her salary. So, I mentioned, so our budget pressures there are the vacancy savings and that we need more transport deputies. And that's pretty much where we go with them. The sheriff's underwrite, I want to remind people that, so we have a transport program and the 24 transport deputies we pay for. But to remind everybody that the car that they get into and the uniform that they put on and the gun that they put on their hip is all paid for by the sheriff, not from our money, not from state money. So the sheriffs have for many years underwritten a big part of the transportation program for the state. And in terms of what's available from us for the sheriff, it's very minimal. We pay a little bit of postage at each of the sheriff's office, like a few $100s a year. We pay a little bit of this, that, and the other thing. There's very little money that comes from our department other than for salary and benefits for the staffing. The sheriffs they were set up in that weird public-private mentorship. So the sheriffs are a public agency, and constitutional officers in a public agency, yet they have to go out and sign contracts in order to pay for all their other staff and all of their equipment and all of that. So it's that very strange combination of the sheriff's departments that we all,
You only pay for the deputies?
we pay for the sheriffs and the deputies.
You do pay for the sheriff?
I'm sorry.
You do pay for the sheriff?
For the elected sheriff.
For the elected sheriffs and for the transport deputies.
The
That's it.
transport deputies, there's two
Yes.
different
Yes,
types.
so-
So there are other deputies they're getting for their private contracts. that do
Correct.
law
Everybody else that works for the sheriff, whether it's an admin, so the county will pay for, correct me if I'm wrong, Senator, but I believe the county will pay for an administrative support person.
We do, yes.
They will not pay for dispatch or pretty much anything else.
But the state also pays per diem.
The state will pay per diem, so.
And dispatch?
No,
No.
no. So if
So the sheriff's office has to do the dispatch.
So if one of our two, generally most of the offices have two transport deputies. So if one of them is out on annual leave or sick leave and a transport order comes in, the sheriff will assign a per diem, one of the sheriff's deputies to go on the transport. And we have a per diem budget that we pay, and we will pay mileage. So even though it's their car, we're still paying mileage, but in essence, sometimes they drive a car to a courthouse and it sits there all day long. And so there's there's no wear and tear, but there's also no ability for them to be accruing mileage for any of that. So there's a lot that they've done over the years that I don't think they've ever gotten full credit for as sheriffs.
So
And,
I also wanted to say that they provide law enforcement to many rural
Yeah, yeah.
communities as well on contract basis. So I drive through Moretown every morning, drop off my kid at daycare, and there's one of Mark Coolin's deputies that sits there most mornings, and that person is a sheriff's deputy or a county deputy.
Right.
Have they picked you up yet?
Not yet.
But the,
You need to make money.
you pay the sheriff's salary, but wasn't the whole issue with the government office bill about that the sheriffs set their own salary?
Sheriff's not, the salaries are set by statute through, as far as the state contributes. The sheriff's by statute, when they came to, I'm not gonna say Ginny, when they came years ago, they wanted to raise, they said, just go out and get contracts, take 5%.
And then they can do a contract,
contract.
so they can get that money in and like.
So they could get up to 5% of contracts.
Right. And they can add that to the salary that they get from.
Yeah.
and a lot of them pour that right back into their
Sure,
operating
yeah.
budget. And some
I
of
just was
them,
trying to remember what the
and
issue was.
then last year, there was a limit, in terms of if you were a newer sheriff under X number of years, you could only take a smaller percentage.
Right.
But I know, for example, Sheriff Anderson pours a lot of that money right back in building his department up. And I think similarly with Sheriff Marcoux, I think there's a lot of work they have to replace things, and that's how they pay for things.
And it was a hit in the sheriff's offices. But appropriations last year addressed some of those issues, which helped out considerably, I might add.
Right. Yeah.
So that's who we are and what we need, and I know that everybody comes in, and I do wanna say, patting ourselves on the back, but, when we came forward with the budget adjustment, we were just looking at the stuff, the bills that came to us that we didn't anticipate getting. We didn't put any positions in a budget adjustment, and Barb and I, really hadn't seen that done before, so, and we didn't do it, so everything that we're asking for is here in front of you, not through the budget adjustment. We didn't, mix that stuff in. So we really, will tell you that, we are really, our staff is depending upon us to say to you, please help us with the workload, and we can't do that without additional positions, and we can't keep people, without addressing their workload.
Okay. We hear you.
Well, it's not a Friday, right? Still Thursday?
It does feel like Friday.
It does feel like Friday. Are we done for the week?
We are, but we are done for the day unless there's